Hi folks, it's Piano Man Steve. Who else were you expecting, right? Anyway, this is another video in the music theory series. Today we're going to tackle the concept of relative major and minor keys. What on earth they mean, etc., etc. ad infinitum. Well, let's get right to it. And I know that this is probably, a lot of you are probably already familiar with this information, and that's fine. There's plenty of videos out there for you that are more advanced. But if you're like me, you took piano lessons for a long time, and you never really were explained what a lot of this stuff meant and what the purpose for a lot of it was. So that's why we're going to talk about some of it. There are major keys and there are minor keys, just like there's major and minor chords. So there's the key of C major, there's the key of C minor. A C major chord, for example, or a C major scale looks like this. But a C minor scale looks like this. Actually, there's three different kinds of minor scales, but that's your natural minor. There's one called Harmonic Minor, which is probably the most common, I would guess. And then there's one called Melodic Minor, where you go up one way and down the other. So it's like... So, anyway, we'll get into that stuff in another video, but the point is, some songs are written in a minor key, some are written in a major key. You've heard the term relative major and minor. Well, what that means is, if you look, for instance, C major has 0 sharps and 0 flats in it. It's just all white keys. C minor, however, has 3 flats. It's C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C. So C major and C minor do not have the same key signature. They just don't, because one has 3 flats and one has 0. Well, if you know anything about key signatures and you see 3 flats to the side, you might say, well, this song's written in the key of E flat because E flat major has 3 flats. I'm not real good with the fingering on this stuff anymore, but I should have done it like this. So you can get confused, but if it's written in C minor, it's also got 3 flats. So obviously C minor and C are not relative. What relative major and minor means is that this major key and this minor key have the same key signature, the same number of flats and sharps in it. So, for instance, in the key of C, the relative minor is A minor. And the reason for that is that A minor has 0 sharps and 0 flats, just like C major has 0 sharps and 0 flats. So in A you go. So what's the interval between them? C to A, there's a minor third between them. So anytime, anywhere on the keyboard that you find a minor third, I don't care what note you're talking about, anywhere, the note to the right is a major and the note to the left is its relative minor. Every single time. C to A. Now if you put A on top and went down a minor third, you'd find an F sharp. Well, guess what? F sharp is a relative minor key to A major, because A major has 3 sharps. A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. And an F sharp minor scale has F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp as well. So it does not matter. It does not matter where you are on the keyboard. If you find a minor third interval, the higher note will be relative as a major to the lower note as a minor in terms of key signature. And so it's you can always tell whether a key's in a major key or a minor key basically by looking at what kinds of chords are being played and where it kind of keeps running back to. Because remember, in Key Signatures Volume 1 in this music theory series, we talked about how the purpose of a key signature was to give you a home base so that you perceive every note that you hear, every chord you hear, is in its relationship back to your tonic note or tonic chord. So let's take, I know I have a lot of Billy Joel fans here, and let's take a song like Moving Out, okay? It's in D minor. Now, D minor has one flat, just like F major. So you could think maybe this is an F, but if you listen to it, well, first of all, we keep coming back to a D minor chord, right? We're not playing an F chord. And every sound that you hear in this, every chord that you hear, you're actually, your mind, whether you know it or not, and your ear is perceiving it in relationship back to this chord, D minor. You're not hearing it in relationship to that chord, F major. You're hearing it here. So, D minor. But another song could be written in F, for example. And if it is, then that's what you're going to hear. That's where everything's going to come back to all the time. Everything you hear, you're hearing in relationship to that chord, F. So that's what major and minor, relative minor means, is it's an identical key signature, but the somber, because of where you start the scale and then the way the chords lay out, the 1, 4, 5 chords, etc., layout, you get that somber, minor, sad kind of sound with the same key signature. So another place that this happens, and I've talked about it in the improvising series, but it's worth noting, the blues scale and the swing scale. A lot of people teach the blues scale. So few people teach the swing scale, and it's such a mistake because it's got such perfect symmetry. Just as a major scale, C to A minor. So C major, same notes, only you start on A and go to A and you have an A minor scale. Right? Well, guess what? A swing scale has the same notes as its relative minor blues scale. So if you can learn a few of these scales, you have something to improvise with in almost every key very quickly. Because, for instance, let's take the A blues scale, okay? A, beg your pardon, A, C, D, E flat, E, G, A, G, E, da, 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 da. That's an improvising scale. Those exact same notes, if you start on C and play it, sounds like this. You know, cheesier, better for country and swing and that kind of stuff, but a useful improvisation scale. And so if you can learn it as a swing scale or a blues scale in a key, then you can then use that same collection of notes. And if you get comfortable noodling around in a particular blues or swing scale in different keys, you have that to draw on when you're in a tougher key, because, for instance, the A swing scale is a little bit harder. It doesn't lead to as many easy fills and runs as the blues scale does. Just the way your hand lays on stuff in an A blues scale, it's just really easy to noodle around. Just like in a C swing scale, it's equally easy. See, I'm doing the exact same fills, I'm just putting a C in the bass instead of an A. A blues. C swing. But a C blues scale is a little harder because it's like this. More sharps and flats and doesn't have as many easy runs. So a lot of times I'll find that I draw more from the C swing scale when I'm improvising than I do from the C blues scale, but I'll draw from the A blues scale more than I do the A swing scale because it's easy, and it's because I've just really learned how to noodle around with that collection of notes that make up the C swing A blues. And I've got that in all these other keys because any blues scale you play is the relative minor of whatever a minor third higher is. So anyway, if you play an F blues scale, that can also be an A flat swing scale. You know, it's useful because A flat's a tough key, but if you can think of it as F blues, it's a little bit simpler. G, a G blues scale is the same collection of notes as a B flat swing scale. So anyway, just food for thought on that. It's the same kind of concept as relative major and minor. And then you'll find these kinds of symmetries all throughout music and music theory. Another interesting thought on relative minors is this. When you're playing by ear, you'll hear songs, for instance, like let's say we're in the key of C. You might hear something like this, and it's going 1, 6 minor, 4, 5. Well, there are times when you can substitute a chord and get the same effect but have a slightly different flavor, and one of the more common ones is, quite often if you're in a major key, you can play the 2 minor or a 2 minor 7, however you want to do it, instead of a 4. So in the key of C, for example, you can play a D minor or a D minor 7 instead of an F, because they're relative major and minor to each other, which means they have very, very similar traits. You'd never do that for the tonic note, I mean, unless you wanted it for the arrangement, but like it fundamentally changes the song completely if you play an A minor instead of a C if the song is in C, because remember, if it's in the key of C, the whole purpose of that is so that you hear everything in its relationship to C. So when you get to where you're supposed to have a C chord and you play this, it changes everything up. But in the context of that, ba bum ba bum ba bum 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 bum, similar enough, it can work. So it gives you some options to play around with. You can do that every once in a while with a 5 or a 3 minor. Right? Because in C, for example, a 5 is a G chord. 3 minor is an E minor, which is its relative minor. So a good example of that would be Piano Man by Billy Joel. Again, And there's hundreds of examples of this, but you're playing along and it's like... Now, the first chord is a tonic chord, so like C. Then it goes to a B, okay, in the left hand, and you have choices. You could play, it's either a 5 chord over its 3 bass, so it'd be a G over a B, or you can play an E minor chord over a B, which makes this a 3 minor. But the thing is, the 2 chords are so related that they both get the job done. So it's just a little bit of talk. Anytime you know, when you get into these, because I get people that watch my tutorials on YouTube and they leave comments all the time and say, so-and-so's tutorial labels this as an E minor 7 and you have it as a G or a G6, or that has a blah, you know. I don't know. You know, we're all anyone who's doing that sort of work, we're listening, and to the best of our knowledge, we're doing what our ear tells us is right. None of us are probably exactly right, but we're doing the best that we can, and I think a lot of us come pretty close. But the bigger issue I have is to point out to that person, who cares? Which one do you like? Play with it, because a 3 minor and a 3 minor and a 5 sound pretty similar in the context of the key signature you're playing in, because they're relative to each other. You know, a 4 and a 2 minor 7 sound very similar because they're relative to each other in the context of your key signature. So, you know, just the more understanding you have of these concepts, I think the easier it is to start thinking outside the box and doing some things because they occur to you and because they sound good to you. So many musicians that are out there today, it pains me so much. They're in such a quest to copy and to try and to try and play it right, that they forget this is an interpretive art. The artist didn't play it right, they just played it the way they played it. And yeah, maybe they wrote it or whatever, but a lot of times the artist didn't write it. They're recording somebody else's written work, and I guarantee you they came up with their own arrangement with it that they thought would be good with their voice and their band and whatnot. So it's an interpretive art, and what I want, hopefully, with this site is to foster an environment where artists like you and like me learn all the nuts and bolts, learn all these different ideas, and then give ourselves the artistic and creative freedom to do whatever occurs to us, to have happy accidents. And if we are playing along and we go, you know, the tutorial says this, but I sure like it like this, I think I'll play it like this because I like it that way. Maybe it's what Billy Joel did, maybe it's not, but I like it that way, and the only thing that really matters is how it sounds to me in this moment where I'm at. He's already got a recording. He already does this every show. But I'm playing it right now. What sounds good to me? And I would like to see that attitude fostered and grown as much as possible, because all of us are creators. Anytime you sit down, even when you're trying to copy somebody else's work verbatim, you're still a creator, because they can't even copy their work verbatim. That whatever they got on that moment in time on film, that was the way. But they'll never play it at exactly that same tempo with exactly. It'll never be. There'll always be tiny changes, even if they're not trying. So, yeah, try to free yourself up from the need to play it the way somebody else says is right, and just learn enough about music that you can trust your own ear and your own heart and go where the moment takes you. So that's what I think makes music the most fun, and that's what the purpose of this site is to help you spread your creative wings as much as possible. Well, I know all of that wasn't about relative, major, and minor, but hopefully I gave you some food for thought, and I'll be talking a lot more about this creative freedom as we go forward, because I think it's really, really important. And traditional music teaching does not give us that permission very much. It tells us the composer intended this, and you do this, and you do it this way. It's written right there, and that's how you're supposed to do it, and blah, 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 blah. It's not even telling you the truth about the fact that, no, the composer didn't write it that way. It's been edited. Every one of those things has been edited and brought into the mainstream because music instruments are different than they were. Hell, the pitch, what is today a G was actually like an F. The pitch was more like an F 200 years ago. We've changed so much. We evolve. So we're not playing exactly what Mozart intended necessarily. And I think it's also completely foregoing the fact that Mozart himself was a composer, and he might have written it one way, but when he was rehearsing an orchestra, he might very well have said, edit this, change this, I like this better this way. He was a creative person, as were Beethoven and Bach and all those things. So we get told to stand inside a box and to do it the right way and the way the composer intended. But that's really a bunch of garbage. It's really, really a bunch of garbage. Those things are blueprints. And we're free to make adjustments. And if you're in an ensemble, then you have to make adjustments as a collective, and everyone gets a say in it, or whoever the leader is gets a say in it. But I played tuba and trumpet in concert band, in symphonic band, and in mixed symphony orchestra all through high school and then in college. And I can tell you that I never worked with a single conductor that didn't have us, from time to time, take a pencil, scratch something out, and change it a little bit. Play that an octave higher, or play that an octave lower. Or, I want you to move that to this fingering or this whatever. Why? Because for the ensemble that we had, it was a change that needed to be made for it to be effective. And that is the same thing you're dealing with. It's fine to watch these tutorials and try and learn it exactly the way the artist played it. But if something sounds better to you in the setting that you're in, then go with it. Because that's exactly what the artist would do too. Okay. I'll get off my soapbox, but I promise you I'll be getting back on it soon enough, and you'll hear more of this. And remember, guys, if you're not having fun when you're doing this, you're doing it wrong. I will talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. Take care.